Right, Mark?
Welcome. Is everyone able to hear my voice? Welcome to the panel. This is champagne sizzle reels on a beer budget, which already gets me excited about that cocktail party a little bit later. Going out on the roof. All right, my name's DMA, Donna Michelle Anderson. I'm very happy to be your moderator today. I'm a recovering reality showrunner. I now wear a suit. I don't tell people where I wear the suit, so I can travel amongst people in anonymity and critically, so I can go on trips and not have to tell the network where I am. So thank you for this trip. I'd like to also thank our panel, our wonderful panel, for what is going to be quite a presentation today. Get your questions and answers ready. We have some great reels, and we have some even more great advice. To my left, we have, and the panel will introduce themselves.
You have Brad Roth, principal of Stun Creative, agency and production company here in Hollywood.
Scott Sternberg. I'm the founder of Scott Sternberg Productions. We're a production company. We do unscripted programming, and what can I say? That's it. That's what we do. Yeah.
You do it well.
And I'm Mark Feldstein. I'm Brad's partner, actually, at Stun Creative, and we do content development and branding and launch TV series and all that stuff.
Love it. All right. First of all, please welcome the panel with a big round of applause. Thank them. We know what our production schedule looks like. Thank you guys for joining us today. Sure. If we can, just please find out who we're talking to so we can tailor the content. If you currently work in nonfiction television production, can you raise your hand, please? If you work in digital, raise your hand, please. Scripted, film. If you actually were just getting drinks at the bar and wandered in, excellent. See you after, upstairs, right on. All right, so we're gonna cover all of those topics today because the truth is a sizzle reel is critical for all of the projects that you do, even if you never show it to anybody. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you an excellent sizzle reel. Everyone get ready.
Really?
First of all, no, that's the second thing. First, because I'm a geek, I'm going to show you today's Google image. Has everyone been to Google today? Are you guys ready? Can we show the screen for a second? All right. This is the Google guitar image, and I can go like this. And I can click this button and record it. Yay, digital. Is that just me? Come on. That's awesome. Woo! All right, this is more awesome. This is more awesome, you guys. All right, I'd like to show you guys from the wonderful Stun Creative, the gentleman on either side of Mr. Sternberg here. Eat this tour.
Life on tour is crazy. All-nighters, partying, ego clashes, hooking up, breaking up. But that's not the band. That's the caterers.
Blink-182, Eminem, Ice-T, Black Eyed Peas, Weezer.
The tattoo on my neck says, "Give me a chance to shine and I'll blind the world." I got that on my 21st birthday as a gift from my mother. Everything I do is to shine.
My name is Jew Mike. My real name is Mike Rosenthal, and they call me Jew Mike because I am in fact a Jew. I've been on the road since I was 17. I just like the road. It doesn't matter. Just take me on any tour and I'll do it.
You wake up every morning and you have no idea what city it is. You roll out with the local help and you're like, what state are we in? No matter what happens, something's gonna go wrong. Mealtime can never be late, and you have to make sure everyone's happy.
Basically, I have really humble beginnings, just like college wasn't an option, no one even told me about it.
She's crazy, she's a lunatic, she's awesome, she's the most amazing, most fun, ridiculous, like all the good and all the bad all in one.
I'm so fucking mad! I have to open this fucking container and I go in and I'm trying to find chips and I'm like, what the hell? And I know immediately. It's powder for their balls. Hey, this container! I don't want that!
You lose your mind when you do this gig. It runs together like Groundhog's Day, and seriously, if you don't lose your mind, you can't do this. You can't do this at all. Favorite time ever was Kansas and Cleveland, Ohio. 4 hours of sleep is the average right now. Like, if I don't lose it like once or twice a day, I'm not working.
There's crises every day. There's people cutting their fingers, burns, getting electrocuted. Today, some local made one of my servers cry. We've had our buses break down in the middle of the night. We have to go live with someone else.
I chopped the top of my finger off. Immediately, I picked the piece of finger up and put it back on. I wrapped the towel around it and I kept going. It looks a little weird, but it works. It goes from God to Shelly to me. If you don't wake up, I'm gonna wake you up. And I'm not gonna nudge you and whisper in your ear. I'm gonna pour a bucket of water on your head.
Robin's one of my main girls. She hurt her knee, and her and Moses got together. And then by the end of the tour, she left him for a girl. And then there was drama, so there has to be no more hookups. I think I really challenge everyone to rise to their higher self. This is not an easy job. It's not for the faint of heart. It's an ass-kicking job. Through that, it challenges you. You know, how are you going to handle situations? How do you handle when you get tired? And I think you come out of this experience just being a better you.
Eat This Tour. Coming soon from Stunt Creative.
That is a sizzle reel. All right, so we're going to start with the painfully obvious. What is a sizzle reel? Because that is what this session is about. But we all have very different definitions. So for you gentlemen, when you're getting ready to put a sizzle reel together for a project, what are the parameters? Are there time limits? Is there a set idea of what you're going to accomplish once this reel is done? What is a reel to you?
Well, I can take this first. I would say that, first of all, before you put a sizzle reel together for anything, and our company does talk, and we do game shows, we do rock and roll, we do documentaries, we do all that kind of unscripted kind of programming. So if something falls into that soup bowl, you really got to know what the buyer really wants before you put your brain into making or spending money into a sizzle reel. So that's really the key thing, is really knowing what the buyer wants. Which networks are you going to go pitch this to? So that's going to have a lot to do with how you build this particular sizzle reel. And then maybe it's modular, so you can do 3 or 4 different versions of it for different buyers.
Right, so when you're thinking of doing a sizzle reel, there's some kind of common parameters you might want to follow. The first is they're short. Ideally, they're in that 3 minutes or under zone. So a sizzle reel is a short representation of your product. Then they could be a focus on talent, they could represent your format, or they could just highlight or represent something extremely stellar about what you're doing. The most ideal sizzle reel in a perfect world is Caesar Milan and a pit bull, and like a steak wrapped around Caesar Milan. And then you turn the camera on, and the pit bull comes running, and Caesar goes, "Shh," and the pit bull sits down. And then you sell the show, and that's 30 seconds, and that's a really cheap sizzle reel, because it effectively conveys everything that you need with very low cost and very high impact. So the sizzle reel is not a trailer, because you don't want to tease or surprise anybody. We do want to know what the actual show is, but it's a short representation of your talent and or format that takes what you can't do on paper and sells it in a way that people understand what's going to happen when the cameras turn on after you give them the check.
I think it's also important when you're doing a reel like that, don't over-explain. Keep it simple, get across the attitude and what the basic idea is of the show and the key characters. But there's a lot, especially if you're doing like a game show or some other reality shows, there might be a lot of minutia that is very important to you, that is actually important to the show, but that as a viewer might just get totally confused and turned off by getting things over-explained. So I really keep it simple, keep the attitude and the tone very clear, and give a good idea of who the main characters are and where the conflict comes from.
So in following up on, go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to say, and keep it short, too. Yeah. I mean, we usually go 3 to 5 minutes. Anything after 5 is a problem. Yeah. So keep it really nice and short.
And you might even want to front load, because most people will watch that first minute. and decide
Yeah.
if they're going to keep watching.
I think that we totally feel the same way because we also come from we do a lot of 30-second work as well. And for us, like, it's in the first, like, 10, 15 seconds, if you don't grab them, they've shut off. So you really got to really get a hook from the top, whether it's in, like, what music you pull or the way you write this or some great sound ups, whatever it is, just really try to hook them from the top so they pay attention for the next 3 minutes.
Okay, so let's go back to where Scott left us off. At what point in the project do you decide we're going to do a sizzle reel? And can you give personal examples of a recent sizzle reel you did and why you chose to do it for that project, including maybe how you came to do this reel?
Sure. I'll speak to that. Before we get to this reel, I'll give you one that we're actually currently out shopping right now. We're shopping a show with the Getty family, with Rosetta and Balthazar Getty. And, for us, the evaluation came down to, there's obviously huge name recognition with their family. There's very few families, other than maybe the Kennedys, Rockefeller, and then Getty, who sort of can, live in that subset. And then we, of course, met the family and the personalities. And then Mark and I, it really goes back to what Scott said at the outset. It really comes down to planning. And the planning begins as early as, do we think this can sell? Will someone find this or them interesting? And then it's planning. And then if the answer is yes, and you sort of vet that and you feel in your gut, and also through your research, and hopefully if you have agents to help you sort of, sort through that, you then go further into the planning of production. So that's how, we sort of start off, as Scott said, do we think something has a strong chance of selling? And we go through a list of criteria. And again, it can vary, but before you spend $1 of your own money, you have to make that determination and feel wholeheartedly that it has a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Brad, because you got to know before you go. And if you really study back to before you make the sizzle reel, you really know what that network's looking for or the buyer's looking for, that's how you can make the decision to make the actual reel. Then I always like to do is keep a sense of humor to these reels, depending on the program. We just sold 2 shows off of sizzle reels. One is called New York City Bounty, which will be on next year. And we went out and we got a bail bonds company in New York City. We signed them all up. We got a deal with the company, and they're all out of their minds. They're nuts. So we said, this is a good reality show. So we shot a sizzle reel first. We shot them in their office, shot them out on the street, shot some busts, stuck it all together, and then we sold the show based on that. So, being out there like that.
What was your insurance cost for that?
Well, there was no insurance. We left but we are also doing a show with the Broward County Sheriff's Department. We're going to do a show of 3 real motorcycle cops who also are out of their minds personally, but they're great motorcycle cops, but as they patrol the streets of Broward County. And that one's also out there too.
Yeah, good combination is usually crazy and talented. It usually works, or at least has a chance of working.
And for the nonfiction folks in the audience, really at this point, so many people request that you're coming in with central talent, with attached central talent. So have you ever shot a sizzle reel that was more format oriented? And if so, did you feel the need to shoot it as opposed to a talent when they want to see your talent? And how did you make that decision to shoot it?
Scott, you should take that for format.
Well, we make them for almost everything now. I think you need to have it, obviously. That's why we're talking about that today. So, that's a tough question. I don't know. It goes from project to project.
Can you think of an example of one that wasn't really kind of showcasing a central talent in their
Well, we've done a couple game show presentations that we've done where we actually create the game and we shoot a mini pilot, which normally will take place in a studio, the whole thing. You just got to go in, you got to light it and put up your set and do that, which explains the game without all the electronics, which is the big money. So we've done that, and we've done a couple of talk show sizzle reels. Well, that's with talent.
We worked on one a little while ago, game show. It was more of a competition game show, and because the show didn't exist at that point, we had to go and this actually holds true for whatever tape you're doing, whether it's reality or scripted or competition. But you sort of start with your paper edit, like write it all down, figure out what's going to fill your 3 minutes so you know what you actually have to shoot or fake, because it's too expensive to go and sometimes do the entire show, unless you have the budget for that. If you need to fake it, you got to find, okay, I have, this part of the show takes place here, part of the show takes place here. I know I got to shoot a little bit in each of these settings, do some interviews, whatever it is. So we basically had to recreate the different types of segments that would be in a typical show. Right. You got to fill in. And one of them, it was like this hidden camera thing that took place in a restaurant. So we had to fake all that. So you beg, borrow, and steal. We knew someone that had a restaurant. They let us in there, when they were closed down in the hours, and you just basically try to fake it. But it's really figuring out in a way that makes it feel like it's a full show, that you can limit what you're shooting to give a taste of the entire experience.
Yeah, you're trying to get to the essence, trying to convey the essence, distill the idea down to its, so it's immediately digestible, very quickly by the buyer, and you're also trying to figure out where to put your production value, because, usually, it's, you don't want to invest too much of your own money for sure, and you want to invest wisely. So you have to figure out where's your biggest bang for your buck going to be spent, and that's you got to be very prudent about that, because there's one fundamental law I think we can agree on to making these tapes, and that is once you commit to making one, it only gets more expensive. It never gets cheaper as you get to the end of the line. There's no doubt about that, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There's unforeseen things. Again, going back to the planning, no matter how much you plan, there's just the nature of you're for the most part figuring this out as you go a little bit as well. And things change, and you realize you didn't get something that's critical, and you do a pickup. So, again, planning will help avoid a lot of that. And there is a little bit of a formula, I think, to these types of tapes sometimes in terms of how you go about the production. But again, once you jump in, it only gets more expensive.
Well, let's drill down to step number one, which is the content. There's a reason something feels like a compelling show to you, right. and then from there you've got to glean what's going to be compelling and visual enough to make a compelling sizzle reel. So if you were to think of, and you already said one critical thing, a talent who is crazy and yet professional, and I like to add producible. If you have that talent, then you've already got the start on a lot of docu-soaps and docu-series. What are some other things that are critical when they come off of your pitch, when they come off of the page and go onto the screen? What are some of the things that you want to represent because it's going to help sell the show that you can't do as effectively on paper? Nice.
I think a lot of it really comes from attitude and sense of humor. Also, what Scott was saying too. It's like people don't want to buy a dry show. So talent is key. That's really a big part of it. But also just a sense of how edgy is this show. That also depends on where you're pitching it to. There's a very different show that's going to be playing on MTV and that's going to be playing on the Biography Channel. Yeah. So it's really what is the talent? Where is your standpoint in terms of what's the vibe of what this show is?
Yeah, and usually, again, you want them to pop. You want them to feel that there's going to be conflict, and this person is sort of unpredictable because that, and is dynamic. That sells. But quite often, again, depending on the tape, but quite often you also want to paint them as an expert in what they're doing. Like Shelley Lynn, for example, she has the most successful catering business, rock and roll catering business out there. So that's what drew us to her, is that she lives in this crazy world. She's self-admitted, she'll admit this herself, a lunatic herself. It really is rock and roll and food, and probably a bit more on the road than probably won't admit to here. But she knows she's very capable. Her business is successful, and that's what the networks are attracted to, is that they can follow her business as a successful entrepreneurial woman who just happens to be, very loud, or live a very loud sort of approach.
You were going to say something?
I was just going to say that even before you get to the sizzle reel step, there's another in-between step of the coming up with the idea and then getting it made, which we like to try to do, which is keeps it on the cheap side.
Oh, we're not quite there yet. No, we're going to drill downwards.
Oh,
now we're just at big pictures, like what's the rule?
I was just thinking about that. Right.
But that's the core of it. Then we're going to move into step by step. So I think the big thing here for nonfiction reels, and we will do scripted in a second, you guys. For nonfiction is if you've got a talent, the reel's got to include the talent, and you want to see the talent in their natural habitat. And I think sometimes you will see, I hate to use that expression, but sometimes your talent's going to want to do a casting reel, and they're going to send you all their appearances on the Today Show, and they will oddly have been filmed from a camera facing a television set and you don't know why they didn't get a master tape and what happened there, but nobody actually wants to see your talent on the Today Show. They actually want to see Shelley on the road, you know, chopping and dicing and feeding rock stars. And they want to see the environment in which you're promising to deliver the show. They want to see the core conflict of the show. Ideally, there is a core conflict to the show, because if not, you don't really have a show. And they want to see what type of human interaction they can expect, because all of this is, you know, scripted or nonfiction, is about storytelling. And so they just want to know what's the conflict and who's interacting with whom. And I would guess, finally, because it's a sizzle reel, you go for whatever, I like to call it the eye grab. What's the big visual of your show? You know on Survivor, a bunch of yuppies are going to get kicked off of a boat and have to swim ashore to an island. It's arresting. It's interesting. When you saw that reel, what were the shots that just made your adrenaline race every time you saw it? What shots were those? The stadium shots. We're going to go on tour with rock stars in this show. I personally am going to PA for this show. I mean, that's insane. Good food and rock stars. So when you're thinking about all of that content, it will help you drill down from that one sheet to, okay, I've got to be extremely economical. What's critical for me to get on camera? So let's talk about how we get it on camera. The big question, do you prep a sizzle reel, or do you just pick up a camera and hope for the best? Trick question, but go ahead.
Back to me?
Back to Scott.
Okay. We do a step in between shooting the actual sizzle reel and from the creation to the sizzle, which is to go out and take one little camera and go out to that particular place where your cast is, the docu-soap it's going to be, or it's going to be any kind of casting situation, and just shoot them with one camera in their habitat and shoot them all. So you have 3 possible ideas, 3 possible groups for a possible show. For instance, I don't know if Brad and Mark looked at 1, 2, or 3 caterers, but they found this one particular caterer. And then look at the tape and look at it carefully and really see if those characters come off the screen. Then you can make a further decision of maybe the possible way to go, because you'll identify what you really want to make. Because as Brad says, right, once the credit card is out, it's open.
I'll add one thing to that, which is really interesting about this tape. This tape is made completely out of almost completely out of what Scott just referred to. We sent one of our guys out with 2 flip cams to the HD flip cams to the concert, or what do you call it, festival that they were at, with just the intent of saying, is this a worthy woman of pursuing? Do we think she is the rock and roll caterer that we want to sort of put our money in? And we liked so much what we came back with. We said, you know what? We got enough stuff on these 2 flip cams between what her and her people and what our guy shot. We can cut this all off the 2 HD flips that we shot for one day at there. And you know what? We'll pull some stuff from Almost Famous. We'll pull some stuff from
they're good at stealing material,
borrowing is how we like to use it.
Paying
tribute to it's homage to all those things, and basically helping sort of create through illusion the world. But that was actually one of our most beer budget sizzle reels, because it literally was a lot of beer on that tour on that day, and also just 2 flip cams, and the rest was just editing.
So recognizing that you have in-house staff, that edited, I'm guessing,
yes.
What was your out-of-pocket approximately for this?
For that one, it was very modest. It was probably $7,500.
$7,500.
Yeah, we went out to we sent someone out to the festival. We got the cameras. They spent the day. We edited for a week, and did some those were simple graphics, and got rented some DVDs. So that was probably all in that, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Maybe even a little less.
I mean, it's important just to think, because of production value and the expectations people have, that a cheap sizzle reel is still in that $5,000 range. $7,500, $15,000 or less is pretty darn good. You can spend much more.
It could be even less if we probably didn't, because we're paying to your point, we have a staff, so that probably even includes that person's time.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're doing it yourself,
right,
it's just, exactly, it just could be yourself. And you don't have to necessarily count that as a cost. It really depends.
So let's talk about how you produce it and where we can find efficiencies inside of that. So as you're prepping, the first thing you're mentioning is go out and pre-shoot and pre-interview.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The flip cam is, in terms of beer budget, the flip cam is one of the 2 technologies, I'll say 3 technologies, that radically changed this because it gave you such high quality, especially if you can light. If this dude can pop a couple lights in there and shoot it on flip cam, that's great. So as you're prepping it, are you doing a beat sheet? Are you doing a production schedule? Like how much full production do you do?
The most important aspect of putting this together is really the prep and the writing. Like between, once you've committed, whether you go out and pre-shoot or you just, I know I want to do this person or this group of people, it's really planning it out, writing an outline, fleshing that out, doing a paper edit so you know what you need to shoot, what you want to borrow, what you want, what kind of graphics you need. Like you really have an idea of what the plan is so you don't wind up overshooting and spending more money than you need to. You really can try to be smart about it and limit what the needs are. And it'll also make your post much easier too. When you actually get into the edit room, you don't just have like hours and hours and hours and hours of footage. You're sort of a little more strategic about what your needs are. The prep is key.
Do you rarely, sometimes, or always storyboard?
We don't, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, pretty much we just put a very simple rundown in front of ourselves, so we don't really storyboard it and actually having the frames and all of that, but we do sort of lay out what we want to accomplish from a particular group of people or cast of characters, and then we try to decide what time of day to shoot it. So you got to sort of coordinate it.
Yeah, if you're doing like a sort of like a reality or an unscripted sort of docuseries, if you know like there's certain events happening, like when we did this one, she was at Coachella, so we knew that like, okay, that's like, we could have gone any day of the week, but we went on the day where there's actually something happening, so if you're only there for a half a day or a day, you're going to get something interesting. You don't just want to just randomly show up with your camera and just, I hope something happens. So you really want to plan that part of it too. And then, obviously interviews for whatever you do, if you're doing this type of, if it's a character-based and it's non-scripted, interviews are essential because they help you not only get to a look inside who these people are, but they can narrate the story as well, hear it through, because that's what people want. They want to know who this person, they don't care who you are, really. They want to know who this person is.
Right, and I think that's a great point. When you're pre-interviewing, part of your pre-interview is going to be saying what's happening in your life the next 3, 12, 18 months, so you can make some schedules accordingly. All right, so you have pre-interviewed, you possibly pre-shot, you've put some creative together, and you've put together a schedule, ideally a 1 or 2 day schedule at the most, because we're trying to save money.
Correct.
Yep.
All of that is free because you've got the experience to do that. If not, you're going to bring in someone who can do that because nothing is more important than, as you said, nothing's more important than the prep. Okay, so at this point, you're getting ready to go shoot. Apart from favor hires, which we'll get to later, how do you save money in production? What cameras are you choosing to use? How are you dealing with audio? How are you achieving production value with, a 3-light kit? Where are you finding some of those economies without sacrificing the look and effect of the reel?
Question.
Well, we happen to own our own equipment, so it's a little easier when you have your own cameras and you have your own edit bays. So ultimately, though, the technology is at a place now that the cameras and the labor, it should not be that much money in putting together what you're trying to achieve. Keeping the quality at a certain level really has to, again, define what is the quality that you really want to show in your sizzle reel, who you're selling it to. It all comes back to the buyer, no matter what. It comes back to the buyer. We're producers, we know how to do this stuff, but it comes back to the buyer. So, in terms of the technology, we just shot a sizzle reel on 3 iPad 2s.
You should have shot yourself shooting a sizzle reel on 3 iPads.
So that's the look that we want to get for this particular sizzle reel. So you can do this for almost any number.
Yeah,
it depends on what you want to achieve. So.
It really does. And there's just key things you don't want to skimp on. Audio, for example. You want to make sure that that people can hear what your people are saying. And if it sounds cheap, it's almost worse than looking cheap, I think, in our opinion.
You always fill in with a little music.
Yeah, you can fill music, you can create some ambient and post, but you just want to make sure that you're not sitting there in the room when you're playing it for the buyer and hoping they didn't, that
they miss something.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's when you cough.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put it. That you're coughing during a period because they didn't hear that bad sort of audio, omission or something. You just want to make sure it feels professional. And again, audio is one of those things that people tend to overlook because everyone's just thinking about the visuals and but you have to be able to, people have to be able to hear what everyone's saying. I know that it sounds sort of basic, but it's more important than you might give it weight to.
If you're putting, go ahead.
No, I was saying for audio equipment alone, it's pretty inexpensive to rent some mics and a mixer, and you have what you want.
Yeah, we rarely shoot more than 2 days for any sizzle reel. I think just again, there's always exceptions.
About 2 days.
But 2 days, I mean, the first day, as Mark said, we really evaluate, like, what are the key goings on that we can sort of cluster in one day. And if your talent is dynamic and really has a healthy ego, which is also a very good criteria to build a show around, so that's also important. They will tell you that they have 5,000 things you have to go to. And the truth is, there's maybe 2 that you really need to capture. So part of that, again, going back to planning and evaluation, is figuring out what do we really want to cover? What do we think the show is about? What do we want to sort of convey to the buyer? What do we think the win is? And once you've established that, then you sort of go through the goings-ons that your talent says they have, and you sort of say, okay, I think this is what we need to shoot, because you don't want to end up shooting something that just falls flat, or you go to and you don't really have the access you hoped you would have. So that's very important. So once you figure out in that what you want to shoot, hopefully you follow that person for a half a day or a day. You get hopefully a nice looking interview with them and the various minions who surround them or supporting cast. And then day 2 often is, once you start roughing it out, at least for us in the edit bay, is what do we need to pick? What didn't we get? What didn't we plan on that we really do need? And then we go back out and sort of shoot a pickup. And sometimes we go out even with a lesser crew than we did the initial day. Day 1, when we do the interviews, we put the most dollars into the production value. You want them to look nice when you interview them. You want to make sure that you have enough ability to capture everything that's going on. And then our second day is usually left for what holes do we need to sort of fill.
All right, so when you're putting together, and you don't own a production company, when you're putting together that core crew and what you're going to spend on this reel, what you have to know is that your shooter knows how to shoot the style of show that you're trying to sell. So nothing's more important than having a shooter who can shoot that.
Yeah,
so that is not something to skimp on. If you're lucky and you work with or have access to someone who will do it as a favor, that's great. If not, that and the audio equipment and someone who knows how to use the audio equipment would be number 2. And 3 is some type of a plan for light. Whether even those shots were outside, but they were really nicely framed. Some of those interviews were bounced, or or God just likes him, So are you ready to light this so that it looks right? And you don't want to skimp in the field on those 3 things. So if you don't know someone who shoots the style of show, that you're trying to shoot, IMDb remains your best friend. If you don't have access to the equipment, then you're in Los Angeles or wherever you are, there's vendors. But also speak with your camera operator, with your DP, with your audio, and see if you can work out a kit fee so that they can use equipment that is something they're comfortable with. And then where do you make up the difference? Well, you might have a lot of favors on set with you. You might have PAs coming in, or your line producer, or someone's going to, production manager is going to come in and help out. And so if they're coming in and that's where you're going to make your savings in the field, you have to feed people. That's like the other critical line item for the budget, crafty.
Yeah, the unforeseen costs, if you will, if you don't actually plan it. And like the Rosetta Getty tape that we had talked about, I don't know if you...
Which we're going to show.
Yeah, we'll show in a few minutes. That's an example also to what you said about making sure we actually hired a guy, a DP, a director of photography, who really is very expert. He's at documentary shooting. And we did it very deliberately for 2 reasons. One, if you're going to be chronicling the world of the Gettys, we wanted to make sure it looked as rich, if you will, as they are, that it was apropos of the subject matter at hand. And we needed to make sure someone was expert at really getting as gorgeous of a look as possible for the limited budget we had. And also, if you have the right person shooting and you can afford it, someone, or as a favor, beyond just yourself going out with a camera, which you can do with like the flip cam examples, what it does offer you is another sort of person, another eyes who can capture, because so much of this stuff is just knowing where to point the camera when, and getting that extra reaction that someone who might be a novice or not a real skilled practitioner might not be able to know, oh, I should have kept the camera pointing at this person before I whipped it over to here. Because you're not going out with 3 or 4 cameras if you're doing it on a bigger budget. You're on one camera, and if your camera's not pointed at the right person at the right time, or your instincts are off and you decided all of a sudden pan over to someone and they're just sitting there and the action's going over here, well, you know what? You just missed a huge opportunity that could be the difference between a sale and not selling your tape. So having the right person shoot, if you can afford it, especially for the right content and the right subject matter, is a critical part of this.
Yes. One other thing you can do in the field that will save you money in post is I definitely believe with that single camera thing, and make sure you're shooting with someone who gets pickups and cutaways. It will save you so much in post about not having to go back out. But if you're not someone who does pickup and cutaways, or even would think to, or do I have a 2-shot here? Am I getting masters? Am I getting nice close-ups and ISOs? That will save you so much time in the editing bay, the money pit. I almost said the money pit. Sorry, editors.
Yeah, I think getting good B-roll for whatever you're doing is key, because it also helps you when you're editing. Very rarely does like someone say like the perfect soundbite exactly as you want it. A lot of times you're editing it up, and you need that B-roll to really not only just sort of fill out the tape and give a sense, but also make your edits easier.
Yes, so you can Frankenbite.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to show a scripted reel right now, because there's a couple things to add for scripted as well. No, we're not.
About unscripted?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, I have a central talent with over 50 network television show appearances. That's profile. That sells her as an expert and authority in the business.
Yes.
What do I do with it vis-a-vis a sizzle reel? Should I have a separate talent reel for an individual like that?
Well, a lot of times when you're doing that type, like we've done, because we'll also not only develop our own stuff, we also do a lot of these upfront presentations for all the networks to help them sell their shows. So, and sometimes they're based around talent. It's a lot of times you would work it into, you'd show it over to cover a voiceover line, and then maybe show a section. You don't want to show too much of this, because it's like, okay, we get it. We get that she's all over. So you would do something like, she's appeared in over, 300 hours of television, is on all the top networks as the expert to whatever. And you'd show a sequence of that, and then maybe show a couple snippets like back to back.
Flash cut?
Just like maybe like a few 4 or 5 second things where she's like, Matt Lauer introducing, or like, today we have so-and-so, today we have so-and-so. You might just want to give a sense of what that is, but keeping it very streamlined. You don't want to sort of overdo it.
So in that nonfiction reel, you're keeping that brief. You are selling your talent, you're selling the environment in which they operate, and the people that you're saying they're going to be able to effectively and influence and give you your story and conflict from. You are selling the sensibility, the visual experience of the show, and mostly you're selling your ability to tell the story. You're selling yourself in the room as well. And you actually have an enormous amount of control over an inexpensive sizzle reel in that space, because for so much of nonfiction, you're selling the people. And the people, if they're cast well, to some degree sell themselves. So we'll get into post in 1 second, but I want to show a sizzle reel for fiction, because there's a couple additional considerations you're going to make if you're trying to put together a reel for a fiction project. So this is Bannon's Way from Mark Gantt.
My grandfather had a set of principles which he liked to call the Bannon Way, a set of rules that anyone could benefit from, even a common thief like me. But hey, all in. We're all human.
These keys can be a little buggy. Maybe I could escort you up.
Okay.
I'm guessing you don't have the 150 G's to pay son.
And now you're gonna beg for our mercy.
Not exactly, guys. Kill me if you want. Today was supposed to be the best day of my life. And then I found out everybody wants me dead.
So we're good, right?
All right. Everyone get an idea of the energy of the show from the reel? How do you make that affordable? All right. Well, the first thing is affordable and scripted is very different than affordable and unscripted, just like highly paid and scripted is very different than highly paid and unscripted. but we're going to leave that for another session. So what are you trying to do with a scripted sizzle reel? With a scripted sizzle reel, you're not cutting a trailer for a film and hoping that people will guess what's going to happen. With a scripted sizzle reel, just like a nonfiction reel, you've got to tell who your principal character is and what that story is and what the core conflict is going to be that we're expected to watch episode after episode, season after season. So when you're preparing a scripted sizzle reel, you're still doing prep, yes? Are you scripting? When you guys were prepping that reel, did you actually have someone write a script and then break it down and budget it out? No, not this.
That wasn't us. Oh, yeah, yeah.
No, that's not their reel. But you recently did.
Yeah, we've done.
Project,
Yeah,
so.
we have. Yes, ours was based completely on a script. Sony's Pictures Television bought it, and it was done. We scripted it first, and then we shot it. Again, there were some loosely scripted parts about it, but it was definitely a script. In fact, we felt it was essential. We wanted to, have some serendipity and some spontaneity, serve us well when we actually did it. But it was definitely a scripted. 100 scripted is scripted as far as we're concerned. We scripted what we shot.
So if we were to roughly say low budget for nonfiction is 0 to 15K, what would reasonable be in your space for scripted?
Well, for the reel that you just showed there, that would definitely be significantly higher, obviously, because you have you have action, you have stunts, and so forth. I would probably say double at minimum, Mark. Would you agree? I mean, the one that we did was probably closer to 50.
I would say for 50 or less would be low.
Yeah. And again, we say 50, it might be actually less because we, as a company, we have costs associated where if you're pulling it together as just an independent, it might be, it would be cheaper. But
it also depends on what type of scripted. I mean, like that is, anytime you're doing drama, it's comedy's more forgiving.
We did comedy scripted, which helped. Yes,
comedy's a lot more forgiving. It's really about the writing and the humor and the timing, and it doesn't have to be gorgeous, even if the final product, if it actually went to series, would be prettier. But drama, I mean, it's about. I mean, you can see it there. It's about just and we shoot a lot of that stuff for more commercial work. But it's really, in terms of the lighting and the DP, just the quality of the film or video you're shooting is just so crucial for that. Just like the framing, the stunt work. I mean, it's almost less about the writing because you can do a lot of it in music and voiceover and like your copy for a trailer like that for a sizzle reel. But it's got to look. It's just more expensive.
I mean, I think so much of your money for scripted is going into production value, and the way to save the money there, well, one is maybe don't open with a high car speed chase, Steve McQueen type of show. But if you think about what they did with the new La Femme Nikita when they were first teasing that out, they really, really sold the single character and her jeopardy. We're cutting. All right, and so if you're going to save that money, then that is where, recognizing we're about to go into post and wrap up, recognizing that that's really where you would save your money.
Well, one other thing I'd like to add also, we have a friend who sold a scripted sort of hybrid dramedy, I would say, series. It was on for a couple of years, and he sold it based on, and he comes from a similar background as us, but he actually didn't shoot a frame. He Frankenstein, he did a rip-o-matic where he went and found, spent a lot of time researching, finding the right movies and TV shows and everything, and he basically, even though you might recognize some of the characters, you could be talking about a main character and you'd see someone you recognize from a movie, you didn't really care because it was written very well and it was edited very well, and he told a story with basically all different characters doing what he wanted to show, and you sort of bought into it. Like it was obviously, clearly that's not I know that footage is borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, but he was able to craft a story and give a sense of the characters, even though he didn't show a frame of original shooting.
So let me show you our last cost-saving technique, because I know we have to go to questions. If you'll put the screen up for 1 second. I'm the biggest fan of what you've called, we'll call it rip-o-matic. I call it tribute clips. I'm a fan of tribute clips. I'm also a fan of Firefox. If you do not use Firefox, begin to use Firefox. No, there's a reason. Okay. So sorry. I don't like the Google thing anymore. Okay, on Firefox, they have something quite exceptional that is an add-on, a plugin called Download Helper. Like Hamburger Helper, but way more awesome. So I'm just going to throw the screen up so you can see. This is the biggest cost-saving tool you're going to find, if I can get it to load. while you're cutting. So if you've done everything you can to prep, you're not going to save the money in the field in terms of production value. You're just going to pare your team down as small as you can and feed them as much as you can. So I'm going to try and find something on here that's not going to get me shot for showing it to you. Okay, here we go. Here's a little soccer thing. So do you see that little soccer video starting? See those 3 rotating balls? Thank you. See the 3 rotating balls in the upper left? The color right up here? Mm-hmm. As soon as I click this, that allows me to download either the MPEG-4 or the FLV file straight to my computer. And if you get the HD versions, and it will say, obviously, and the MPEG-4s, a lot of them are HD, you can actually pull off of people's sites. I'm sorry I'm showing this to you, but I am, because that's really how you save money on a sizzle reel. And that's what goes into post with you. And the other 2 savings in post are going to be voiceover, 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 and diary or on the fly, whatever interviews you can get in the field. Once you get into post, what you can save by finding what you already want, because sizzle reels are just to sell the product, they're not to be broadcast or distributed. So those are the tips that we have on keeping it short, sweet, cheap, and hopefully effective. And now we'd like you, if you'd like to come forward for some questions. Oh, I thought you said time for questions. In that case, we want to thank the panel so much. I hope we answered a lot of your questions already. And we will be available for you as you stream out of here so the next session can begin. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.